Alright, excellent. And he's already mic'd up, so
No, we have.
You ready?
yep.
It should be able to stand in
Alright,
like
if you're ready, I'm rolling.
You gotta talk real loud.
Sorry.
Did I do it? Was I forceful there? Was
Nice.
I-
I got the picture. That was good. Yeah, we heard you.
You're rolling.
Okay, well, good morning. Thank you so much for coming. If I could have you start by just saying your name and then spelling your last name.
Herman Killian, Killian.
Thank you. My name is Laura Arata. It is March 3rd, 2014, and we are conducting this interview on the campus of Washington State University, Tri-Cities. So if we could just start out, I would love to have you tell me a little bit about how your family came to the White Bluffs area and where they came from.
Okay. My family were German immigrants. Mr. Brigham, the Brigham Ranch out there by the way station there at the bridge, brought them over, paid their way for a year's work for their room and their board and their way over here. You see, they came from Germany in 1927, and they were in such a bad recession. A pound of butter cost 1,000 German marks for a pound of butter, and they were so poor they couldn't get married, so they got married and came to White Bluffs.
And how long did they work on the Brueggemann Ranch? And when
They worked 1 year at the Brigham Ranch. Now you can see the Brigham Ranch when you go over the Hanford Road to the bridge. It's right to the right. There's some old shacks still out there. That's where they spent the first year of their life in the United States.
Do you know if they spoke any English when they came here?
No, but they were smart. They learned it pretty quick. There isn't that much difference between English and German. A lot of it, if you're smarter than me.
So when did they acquire their own land?
Well, I think there was most of the farms around there a lot of them were under receivership, and so they bought a little 5-acre tract. It was probably either the first or second year when they were here. My dad went to work for the railroad and had a steady job, about 40 cents an hour. And anyway, they bought this 5-acre tract with a little house on it. They had to carry their water about a quarter of a mile from the house. We had no electricity until we moved to another house a few years later, but it was that's the way it was.
Did your family grow crops on that property?
Dad worked on the railroad and Mom was the farmer, and we grew potatoes and carrots and everything that you buy in the store for vegetables. We grew everything that we ate. All we bought was flour and spices.
And now, what year were you born?
I was born in 1931, right in the heart of the Depression.
Right. And how many children were there in the family?
Well, I think there were 7 of us altogether when my youngest brother was born in Sunnyside, but there were 6 of us in White Bluffs.
Do you have any memories of White Bluffs as a town or as a community at that time?
I didn't understand that.
Did you travel to White Bluffs a lot?
I
Remember as a town what it was like?
I would like to give you a little idea of what I went on a trip up the Columbia River on that Hanford White Bluffs tour when we had our picnic time, and it kind of brought back memories. You see, the White Bluffs was the Columbia River. It's just like Hanford. The Hanford project took that area because it was a unique spot, had lots of water and kind of isolated. But the Columbia River was a big heater. The earliest fruit that was picked in Washington was picked at White Bluffs because the Columbia River the air always came in from the north and the east, and the Columbia River then was heated up the air, so all of the fruit was planted along the Columbia River from Hanford over to Vernita, not quite to Vernita, but all of the fruit was never heated. They never used any smudge pots because of the heat from the river and the White Bluffs. You see, the White Bluffs was a reflection from the sun because of its unique whiteness. I remember one year when I was about 11 years old, it was 130 in the shade, the 4th of July. That was, and I helped my neighbor haul out apples, and it baked the apples on the tree. It was so hot. So White Bluffs was probably the warmest area in the state because of those bluffs. You know, the sun reflection off of the white sand. And when you're going up this river, you get to the bend in White Bluffs, you will see a area out there that's got a whole lot of green vegetation on it, water grass stuff. That would be a sandbar in July. But you see, when they put the dams in, they regulated the water so that the river was high enough where it always covered the sandbar, if you get the picture. Okay? And the Indians would use the sandbar then to put and catch salmon out there on the sandbar. That kind of brought memories back to me. Then when you look over to the left, if you want to take a trip up that Columbia just for the fun of it, if they have one, but there's a bluff up on top which was the road, and that road was covered with 6 inches of water or more in 1937 or 8. Had that big flood, but you can imagine how much water came down there. Anyway, I remember I was in the back of the bus when the bus driver decided maybe he was going to go through there. He got scared and turned around. Well, we turned around in the water, you know, because it was so high. But history you can find out in history just exactly what year that was. There was so much snow that we made forts in the school. We had snowball fights, and anyway, it was a big snow year, and it was the same year. 10 years later, it happened again when Vanport was flooded out down in Portland, when the roads in the Tri-Cities were underwater along the river. You know, there was a lot of water came down that Columbia once in a while. I'm not sure what happens now. I think they regulate it pretty well with the dams. Then you get around to the bend of the road. There's a big house up on the hill that they left there. It's the only house that's left in White Bluffs. That's the Heidemann house. And he will tell you that. And that was a big mansion. I remember going to that Heidemann house when I was a kid. She had all the state-of-the-art furniture, all of the big chairs and high stuff, everything. It was quite a sight. But Heidemann went broke during that depression, and he lost it. Anyway, he went plumb broke anyway. But that's the way it was. So and then you see, there was 4 farmers that was left in White Bluffs when Hanford came in. There was Mr. Fanning. Mr. Fanning had a pretty good sized farm, probably 100 acres, and he had dairy cattle and milk cows, and then he grew white rose potatoes, and the government bought his potatoes and his milk for the army. That's they were left in there, and then there was Clark. There was Pat Clark, and then another guy, I forgot his name, is then Skelton. There was 4 of them that stayed in there for 2 years and raised fruit for the army. Okay, if you know what I mean. And anyway, they came out of there pretty well off. The government paid them pretty well. So that's the story of the Columbia River, because White Bluffs was the Columbia River, because that was the heat from the water. That's why the government took that spot, because of that big river and the cooling capacity that it had. And other than that, I don't know a whole lot more about what happened. If you want to ask me a question or two, I'll try to answer it. But that Columbia, that sandbar was quite a attraction, because the Indians came there, like I said, and then the carnivals came down. Not the carnival, but the monkeys and the zoo. Is that what you call it, the zoo? Anyway, they set up down there, and of course it was a good spot. It had lots of water, feed the animals with, but it was quite an attraction for.
It was like a traveling circus, something of that.
Anyway, I was in the 6th grade when we left White Bluffs. When I was 6th grade, and I was 12 years old. And
do you have any particular memories?
the one thing that was kind of the sheepmen liked White Bluffs. There was 4 different. Well, let's see. There was Simon Martinez moved in there about the mid 30s, and Simon Martinez now has got the only band of sheep in Washington that's commercial. But he got his start there at White Bluffs. And there was lots of they didn't irrigate too much, but in the spring of the year there was lots of cheatgrass, and they had lots of food, and we actually fattened up the lambs just on grazing on the cheatgrass stuff that grew out there. So it was being warm, whatnot, why it was good to lamb. So that was a good spot for the sheepmen. And they would. The one thing that I remember about White Bluffs as a kid is that there were some little blue lilies that grew there were some hills out there that were still desert. It was too high. They couldn't get water to it. We'd walk around out there and we'd find these little lilies out there, the little blue lilies. So that was our spring work. As soon as the snow got warm, these lilies would come up. Anyway, that was other than that, why most of us was poor.
White Bluffs, obviously it's an agricultural community. Do you have any memories of the town itself and some of the businesses?
I worked with my mom. My mom was a farmer, and we grew potatoes and carrots and rutabagas. We had a root cellar, and we filled that up. Well, a root cellar was they take the railroad ties and then we'd cover it up with dirt, and it was actually always warm in there in this root cellar. it was underground, and we'd go down and when I'd get home from school, we would top carrots and rutabagas and put them down in the root cellar. Of course, Dad worked on the railroad, so we did everything basically in the evening, and we gave the Indians came over a few times. That was quite a sight to see old Johnny Buck. I still remember Johnny Buck sitting on his big old pinto horse with his tomahawk stuck in his saddle. He looked kind of mean to me as a kid. I was about 10, 11 years old, but evidently Mom gave him some food, some potatoes and carrots and stuff, and he'd come back once in a while and get some stuff. But anyway, I remember Johnny Buck, the Yakima chief. Anyway.
Can you tell me a little bit about going to school? What school was
My
that?
school, there was, it was a three-story, I think it was anyway, a three-story school building. We had basically three grades in one room, a teacher for every 3 grades. So there was probably somewhere around 6 or 7 of us in a grade, and Mrs. Moody was my first teacher, and then Mrs. Reisner was my second one. But then we moved. But the high school evidently burned down the last year before we left there, and so the high school all went to Hanford, and they were getting ready to build a new school, and of course the government said move out, so we moved out. Which, when looking back, it was a good deal for our country that we did. They took our area. It was kind of sad at the time, but when you look back and see what good was accomplished, why it was worthwhile. My dad went back a few times to Fanning's place and cut his. We had a little tractor with a mower on it, and he went back to Fanning's and cut his hay a couple of times.
You talked a little bit about some snowball fights and forts and things. Do you have any other particular memories?
Well,
of
they were just
school?
it got pretty mean, I mean, these big guys that started throwing at us little kids, well, it hurt a little bit. That was, and you can look in the record to see just when it was that year. Okay, but it was in the late 30s, because I was in school and I was born in 31, and it had to have been 6 or 7 or 8 years later, whatever. So, but
do you remember any sorts of community social events that ever happened? I know you mentioned the 4th of July. Was there ever picnics?
4th of July, 4th of July was a I was off something. It just come on.
We'll get you hooked back up.
Okay. 4th of July was the later years was quite an event. We had a gentleman who belonged to our church that delivered our fuel, gas man, Mr. Sweezel. But he evidently made enough money and whatnot where he would buy a whole gob of firecrackers and stuff, and so we, at least for 2 years, maybe 3, and I remember Mr. Sweezer buying these. I remember when I was a kid, I dropped a fire. I had a firecracker laying there at my feet, and I dropped one down on there, and I was in the middle of a firecracker cracker. But they were little when they didn't hurt anything. But that was, and the last event that we had was in 42, and they tried to burn down the town of Hanford. That's where he lived. They had a range fire out there with the wind blowing. Anyway, anyway, that it was by the 4th of July, that cheatgrass was all dried up. What the sheep didn't eat was pretty volatile. I mean, it burned pretty good. Anyway, it was fun growing up in that little community. You know, you knew everybody, but it was also a little bit. I never did know where everybody lived. There wasn't very much, because I just went to church with my dad in the car, and one time I remember driving around the river, and showed me where these orchards were, where they lived. But other than that, we were pretty much in our own little community there. And they talk about a ferry that went from the White Bluffs to the islands. They grew produce out on the islands. I'm not sure whether the Japanese did it or what it was, but anyway, they grew some produce on that island. But I never did see the ferry. I will have no clue where the ferry is. So you'll have to look on the map and see where that is. But that, anyway, the flood of '37 was quite a deal, and I helped my neighbor yard out apples for a couple of years. That seemed kind of strange. You're 10 years older out there hauling out apples, but we had to work in those days.
Right. Could you tell me a little more about church? Did your whole family attend? Did your whole family attend church? Was that a pretty regular activity?
Well, we went to the Lutheran church, and there was a Presbyterian church in White Bluffs and a Catholic church. And I think, and then the Pentecostal church came in about the mid 30s. I remember Mr. Ham was one of the. There were two Ham boys that I remember. The one got cancer, and the other boy was a big tough kid, and he tried to get a cart off the railroad track, and he didn't make it. A train hit him and killed him. But Alan was his name. But anyway, my life was Dad working on the railroad and us farming. And I milked cows when I was 6 years old. I started milking cows. So that was how it was.
Do you know if your parents belonged to the Grange or any other?
The Lutheran Church didn't believe in the Grange and lodges, okay, but they had a Grange hall there. Mr. Fanning was the head honcho there at the Grange. Yeah. We had a neighbor, Win Shaw, that had the apples that we worked in, and he loaned Dad his machinery and his horses to farm with when he came there. So Win Shaw was a vital part of our life, and because we wouldn't have made it without him, I don't think. And my little sister and my little brother was named after him, Winfield and Juliet. Winfield and Juliet Shaw, named after Win, Juliet.
So could you talk a little bit about when your family had to leave White Bluffs?
Well, what we did, what?
When you had to leave, do you remember?
We had to leave White Bluffs?
Yeah, what that was
Well,
like.
we got a truck and loaded up the sheep and loaded everything that we owned on it and came to White Bluffs, or came to Sunnyside, which wasn't a bad move. I mean, it didn't hurt us any. You know, it's life in Sunnyside was probably better than White Bluffs. I mean, there was more opportunities.
recall at all? You were 11 or 12 when you
I
got
was
the
12
letter.
when we left there, yes.
So do you remember any of that, like getting the letter in the mail telling you had to leave, or any of that process?
No, I don't recall too much about what happened. They offered Dad a job on the railroad over there, but he didn't want to do it, so we didn't stay there. But Dad was a good. Dad was probably the toughest guy in the country, at least over there. He was a strong boy. I mean, he could do things that most of them guys couldn't.
What did your family do once you moved to Sunnyside? What did you do once you moved to Sunnyside? Were you still
Well,
farming?
we had a little farm. It was we were right on the edge of the north side of Sunnyside, where the Sunnyside Canal came around, and we were out there in the sagebrush with the rattlesnakes. We didn't. I don't remember any rattlesnakes in White Bluffs. Maybe there were, but we never encountered it. But in Sunnyside, we killed anyway 20 or 30 the first year. There aren't things that come down and get in the water and anyway. But we had to get rid of our sheep because it was pretty dangerous out there, herding the sheep out there in the sagebrush with the rattlesnakes. So we just decided, well, we just bunch the sheep.
Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you'd like to share? Any other memories? Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to share that stands out?
No, like I say, the main thing that I remember about White Bluffs is that big Columbia River, and that Brigham Ranch where Mom and Dad came, and the Heidemann house where they worked at Heidemann for a year. So I mean it was those kind of things. But then the sheep. I've got one story I want to tell you about the sheep. Okay, this is a story about our sheepdog. Mrs. Huffler gave Mom a shepherd of some kind. It wasn't it was he was a young pup, and he was a good sheepdog. And anyway, about a year later, Mrs. Huffler evidently lost her dog, and so she came over and took our Teddy back home. And this was in the spring, and in the summertime, Teddy came back home. All he had left on him, she completely shaved him so he could run without getting too hot, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, he was except for around his neck, and we never thought no more about it. Anyway, Huffler's left Hanford. Hanford left in the fall of 42, and we moved to Sunnyside. And about August, that's in 43, why, here come this dog over, and here come this dog, and I was out working in the produce stuff, and here come this dog, and he was always a mangy looking mutt. I mean, you can imagine, he probably ran around out there for a year, or less, or 6 or 8 months anyway. He didn't like Mrs. Huffler very well, let's put it that way. Whatever she did with him, I don't know, but I went home and I said, Mom, Teddy's out here. And I says, Teddy? He wagged his tail and come up to me. And so we found a dog again. He found us in Sunnyside. Came all the way over that mountain over there to get here.
Did you keep him after that?
That's a fact. That was Teddy, and he lived for about another 10 years. Of course, he was a big dog, and he liked to fight. And we had 2 females, and he got tore up so bad that one day he came home with his eye hanging out, and so I had to put him to sleep. But anyway, that's my story of Teddy. That that was probably the one that I remember the best. You know, my dog.
Yeah. Well, I got a note. I'm supposed to ask you about the boat races. Do you have any memories of the boat races at White Bluffs?
Boat races? I don't. I don't. Were they? They. I don't think they had them early, did they? When were they supposed to have had them?
In the 30s and
When were the? When were the boat races?
sometime in the summer in the 1930s and 1940s.
I'm told the 1930s and 40s.
In the
summer.
1930s, there were some boat races. Well, I don't know of any. I of course, my dad wasn't, or folks wasn't interested in that kind of stuff. So I did a lot of things I didn't do. Like I say, I never got to the east side of town. I don't know who lived out there. I knew who lived out there, but I don't know where.
Great. Was there anything else that you think it's important for students who maybe don't know about White Bluffs to know about what happened there before it was closed down?
Well, not really. I think basically White Bluffs was an agriculture community, and some made it and some didn't. You know, it was a depression time. I mean, it wasn't any different than Sunnyside. People came out from the Midwest. You know, we fed people that came out here from the Midwest with nothing. You know, and after the drought and everything that they had. We just kind of raised crops and puddled around our own way.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell me about Hanford? Any of your responses to kind of the end of World War II when you found out what was going on there?
Well, Hanford was Hanford was a bad word for Sunnyside people. I mean, for White Bluffs people. Whatever. Well, it really wasn't. I mean, we were all just one community, but I didn't know the kids who went to school at Hanford. You know, because that was oh heck, it was 7 miles away, and you had you know. You didn't get very far very fast.
Right.
We were lucky if our old car ran.
So do you recall how you felt when you learned what they were making at Hanford at the end of World War
Well,
II?
it was kind of a. It didn't bother me any too much. I mean, it would have been a little bit. It would have been a little bit easier if they'd have told us what was going on, but it was such a military secret that, you know, they didn't. I don't know whether the workers that worked out there knew what they were working on. You know, they just built stuff, and that was their job. But what was going on was kind of a military secret. You know, they didn't want somebody shooting bombs over to blow the place up. I think so. It was kind of a hush-hush operation.
Great. Well, that is all my questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to be included?
Well, you know, when you're 6 years old, you don't know a whole lot. You know, that's all I remember.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing your memories with us. I really appreciate you being here and sharing all these stories. I'm out of questions.
You're out of questions.
Are you
Okay.
okay on time? Is that okay?
Did I talk
I
too?
don't want her yelling at me.
Did I talk too much? My wife says.
No,
my wife says I talk too much. But
that was wonderful.
I've got I'm dyslexic. I can remember everything, but I can't read. Yeah, I had a hard time reading, but I could remember everything that I heard. So I mean, I don't forget